But up first, who doesn't love a road trip? You get
Mm.
into a car with another person, drive across the continent, see what you can find. But what happens when one of those travelers is a divorced, neurotic former altar boy who almost throws the other traveler, an eccentric bohemian Jewish artist, off a cliff? Well, that is the true story behind the book Laughing at the Sun, the story of a man who changed his spots. The author is Michael Naiman. Michael has written for the Chicago Tribune, Chicago Sun-Times, and the LA Times Syndicate, and his articles have been nationally and internationally syndicated. Hello, Michael. Welcome to The Gaily Show.
Hi, JP. Thanks for having me on.
All right, so before we get to the episode on the cliff, I want to understand who these two people are, one of which obviously is you. So let's start there. Michael, the divorced, neurotic former altar boy.
Right. Um, right. Laughing at the Sun is it's a midlife crisis cross-country road trip book where two friends, bizarrist, and I'll explain that later, Robert Fisher and myself, get in a yellow rental truck filled with his art. And the goal was to travel from Chicago to Palm Springs. And for 4 days, we're in this rolling confessional where we talked about the changes going on in our lives. And for Bob, it was coming out as gay after a 20-year marriage and 3 children. And for me, it was my umpteenth failed relationship. And people might think because Bob was an artist that he has a degree in art from college, and no, he has a degree in psychiatry, or actually psychology. So I had my own built-in therapist for that whole time, and just to insert here too, your listeners might be familiar with a recent Netflix documentary called Will and Harper, where Will Ferrell and Harper Steele, they've had this 30-year relationship and they go on a road trip because Harper is a trans woman, and they talk about those changes in their relationship. And I want to point out, though, that our story has those parallels, but it took place 25 years earlier in 1997, prior to same-sex marriage, and I think people weren't as receptive to the queer community, and so it was pretty challenging.
So tell us about what was happening to you in your life before you got into that truck with Robert's art.
Well, I should share that I've been an ally for the queer community for quite some time. My first marriage was to my high school sweetheart. We got married right out of college, but that relationship dissolved after 2 years because she came out as being a lesbian. Very heartbreaking and confusing to me, but after some time in therapy, I really came to see that that was the only decision that could be made. She had gone through she was a survivor of some abuse. Her mother had had 4 husbands. And so I could see that that was going to be a problem. So then I went on my own kind of journey, trying to figure out where I go to next. I was really, indecision was a big factor in my life. So I wasn't sure what to do. I would do analysis paralysis, not knowing. I would get into a relationship and overthink it. I had a fear of commitment. To this day, I'm almost 70 and don't have a tattoo. Can't even come close to making that kind of a commitment. And I wasn't giving and or receiving unconditional love. And it wasn't until, and we can talk about this later as we talk about Bob and Edward, until I saw their relationship and I saw how they had this really great connection and they gave each other a lot of support and, most importantly, unconditional love. So I was mistaking, love for lust and jumping from relationship to relationship. And after having been burned that first time in my first marriage, it took me a long time, well into 1996, I think, before actually this road trip with Bob was the inspiration for me to turn my life around and change my spots, so to speak, become a better person, a better man.
So that's who you are, getting into that truck. Who is Bob now, the eccentric bohemian Jewish artist who is known in Chicago as the Windy City Warhol?
Yes. Bob was, it's interesting because we were friends a good 15 years and he was very eccentric. He dressed, in very colorful clothing. He had tattoos before that was really popular, and he wore jewelry. But you know what? So did Keith Richards of the Stones. So I never gave it any thought because he was married. He had 3 kids, and the flags were there. I should have kind of figured this out. I didn't have gaydar back then, I guess, but we would go to a lot of nightclubs together as part of our posse. He was called the Windy City Warhol, and he had a very Warhol-like existence in Chicago. We never waited in any lines, but we would go to a lot of gay clubs because they had the best music and we had the best time. So never thought about it though. It wasn't until just before we went on this road trip that he had shared that. And it wasn't even, it was shared in a very offbeat way. He had had a gallery show and I was in attendance for that gallery show. And Edward came out. Bob was living out in California at the time, but Edward came in from Palm Springs. He was in Chicago for this gallery show. I was with my partner, and she was chatting up Edward, and Edward kind of outed Bob, and she kind of whispered in my ear, "Did you know that Bob's gay?" And no, and so it was kind of a shock to the system, but hey, he found somebody that he loved, and that was important. I think that interestingly enough, I had a very good connection with his wife, Paula. We both kind of shared the same story. We had both lost our partners as they came out as being gay. And so, and to this day, actually, I'm really good friends with Paula. Would you like to know how we met, though, me and Bob? Because that's kind of a fun story.
Yeah.
Is that good? So I'm
very interested in how we get to this truck and how the truck
kind of a roundabout way, but come along for the trip,
Yes.
I was dating this woman who was working for an advertising agency, and she said, "Would you like to come to this underground Halloween party?" And I thought, "Oh, okay, sure, I'm open-minded." And she had one caveat, though. She said, "You have to dress provocatively." So I go to my closet and I look around and I'm like, I don't see anything provocative. So I had to be creative, and I came up with a costume that this kind of demonic clown, I called him Satan the Clown. So I had this very menacing face paint and everything. And then she dressed up as a sexy French maid. And so we had this kind of good combination of creepy and sexy. And we go to this, it was called the Circus of the Bizarre. And Bob, bizarre is his term. It's bizarre art. And he used to do these, what he would call neo-vaudevillian extravaganzas, where he would have all these performers. And this particular one, he had fire eaters and glass eaters and exotic dancers, men who had really great names here. I wrote these down so I don't forget. There was Buster Hyman, Biff Cakes, Randy Hooker. They had a 5-man dance troupe called the Beef Trust, well before Magic Mike was ever on the screen. And so we go to this event, and it was so much fun. The people, there were a lot of exhibitionists, there were a lot of voyeurs. It was like really a cool combination. So the very next day, I write Bob Fisher a letter, and I said, dear Mr. Fisher, I went to your Circus of the Bizarre. I found it to be the most decadent and disgusting display of humanity I've ever seen. I loved every minute of it. How can I get involved? And he calls me up, we go to dinner, and I became his production manager. So that started a 15-year relationship. Wow. And then, as I said, as time progressed, he moved out to California in the early 90s. He was living in LA, then he moved out to the desert. He met Edward at a men's group that gay men who were in marriages. And I think that was 96. And then he had the gallery show in Chicago where I met Edward. And so he came out sort of inadvertently.
Wow. So Bob wants to get art from Chicago to across the country. Right. How did you both agree to get in this truck together?
Oh man, this was really, that's one of the reasons I was ready to kill him. I had done a couple cross country trips before. I love road trips. As you were saying earlier, put in some good music, open road. What more could you want, right? And so when he asked me, he goes, I have to drive my art. He had put a lot of his art in storage in Chicago, but as I said, he was living now in LA. He said, I need to transport my art into the West Coast. Would you be interested in doing that? I'll fly you home if you drive out with me. And I was like, so what are we talking here? Is it a, matter of days? Is it pedal to the metal, or can we kind of enjoy ourselves on the road? Because I wanted to see sights and, have coffee shops, enjoy myself. I didn't want to just be racing down the highway. Although in Iowa and Nebraska, one needs to do that because it's so expansive and flat. But so Bob goes, yeah. I said, so a 5-day or 7-day excursion? He said, it can be 7. We'll take our time. And what happened was that wasn't the case at all.
Mm,
And I get it. He was missing Edward, and within a day or two, it was obvious that he wanted to do pedal to the metal. And I think we did it in 4 days. And I wasn't happy about that. And at one point, he said some pretty rude things. He pressed a lot of my
that's
buttons.
I want to hear
Okay.
about the buttons because now we're driving towards the cliff, as it were. We're talking with Michael Naiman, author of Laughing at the Sun, the story of a man who changed his spots. We're going to take a break here, but before we do, I want to share about our travel partner, Travel Marquette. And the reason why is that Marquette, Michigan is a very special place to me. For the past decade, I have been going there every single year. And part of the reason why I love it is that I don't have to worry about traveling while queer while I'm there because it's a university town, super blue city, in a super blue county, very active pride organization. The Stand Up Comedy Festival will be back at the Oradoc Brewing Company in Marquette, November 5th through the 8th. And also starting in November, you can experience the magic of the holiday season as the historic Lower Harbor Oradoc lights up with magical laser displays every Thursday through Saturday from 6 to 8 p.m. on the north side of the dock. This is a huge dock, literally out in the water. And it's designed by the Fresh Coast Light Lab, free, family friendly. Obviously, you're downtown, so good restaurants and holiday shopping. If that is something you would like to do, you can start your adventure at travelmarquette.com. That's travelmarquette.com. DM me on Blue Sky. Happy to give you all sorts of recommendations of where to go and shop. You're listening to The Gailey Show. Welcome back to The Gailey Show. I'm John Parker. We are coming up on the bottom of the hour. I'm here with the author of Laughing at the Sun, which is the true story of a 1997 4-day midlife crisis road trip across America. Michael Naiman, all right, you're in the truck. The art is loaded. You and Bob are now driving across Iowa
Yeah.
on your way to Los Angeles, kind of pedal to the metal. We're coming up on an incident where you get into an argument with him. I'm laughing, but it's a serious thing. Where there's holding him off a cliff, shall we say? Tell us about it.
Well, let me back up just a second, because as I was thinking about writing this book, I keep journals all the time. I was looking at these journals and I thought I should write a book about this because it was a fun story. And since Bob's a major player in it, I wanted to call him and make sure he was okay with that. So I called him up. I said, Bob, I'm thinking about writing a book about that road trip we did together. And he goes, oh, the one where you almost killed me? And I had to stop for a moment because it's like, what? I completely blocked that out of my mind. And then I thought to myself, man, I really have to write this book now. And what happened was we were about mid-trip and we're looking at this expanse and it's beautiful. And I'm just enjoying the moment. As I shared earlier, that was part of why I wanted to go, was to enjoy nature and see the country, And Bob's like, looking at his watch going, come on, we gotta get going. And so he was just pressing on my buttons, and he knows where to press because he installed them. And so I grabbed him by the collar and I really got angry. I pushed him and he was really right on the edge of this cliff. And I swore.
Now, where is this? Is this like the Grand Canyon or?
No, it was a lookout. It was a pretty big expanse, but yeah, it wasn't the Grand Canyon. He would have gone 100 feet maybe at the most, but still, it would have done some damage.
The most.
What's funny though is I'm yelling at him, not realizing that there's people all around us kind of witnessing this, And so I put him down. I said, I'm sorry. But he really was pushing me hard. And it's like, come on, we need to just take our time and enjoy this trip. And so after that, though, he kind of saw that he needed to back off a little bit. And we cleared the air. We were fine. But that's how the book starts, though, is that I'm holding him over a cliff. Yes.
That's a good place to start a book. You talked about it earlier of being a 4-day, road trip of therapy. Essentially, you both are going through pretty significant life changes, and when you've got two people trapped in a truck, what was coming up for both of you? As you were going along there. I mean, you call this. I mean, the subhead is the story of a man who changed his spots.
Right. Well, for me, because I want to spend time on Bob, though. I think it's important since he was going through the issue of coming out. For myself, though, I remember a a friend had said to me one time, with all these failed relationships that I'd had, he goes, well, a leopard never changes his spots. And I remember it was depressing to me to hear that, because I thought, no, 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 I can change. I can be a better man, And after this experience, after witnessing what Bob and Edward had, their unconditional love, the relationship, it inspired me to pursue things like a gratitude diary. I wasn't a big Oprah fan, but I happened to watch one of her shows where she talked about a gratitude diary. So that was one thing that I started doing, which really changed my life, because I remember she says that, write 3 to 5 things you're grateful for every day. And I did this for like a month, and it was just monotonous. I was like, this isn't moving the needle at all. And then one day I remember coming home from work thinking to myself, oh, what a day. I can't think of 2 things, let alone 5, And when I really sat down to do it, I came up with 20. And I thought to myself, okay, I've been focusing on the negative things too much. I need to be more positive. And then a friend of mine was going through an AA program, and he had a 12-step program. And I asked him about those 12 steps, and I modified them to meet my needs. So I did things like reaching out to my previous partners and apologizing and trying to make amends. Some of them were open to it, other ones not so much. But I made that effort, and I really worked hard. And I even took myself out of the dating scene for a good year. I wanted to make sure that I was, looking for someone I wanted to settle down with. And I'm, I was in my 40s at that point. And I'm happy to say that I'm celebrating my 19th anniversary with my wife, Laura, next week. So that's really, goes to show you that you can change your spots.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And for Bob, his shift was, he had a wife, Paula, for 20 years, and three children. He had already made the shift, though. They had come out to California. He was living out in LA, and then he moved to the desert. He had met Edward through a men's group. And he had made that shift, though, that he knew he needed to come out. He needed to be true to himself. He needed to live his truth. And so when we were on the road trip, it wasn't so much that he was processing that as much as we were just talking about, he was filling me in on who Edward was, and how they fell in love and how they met and so on and so forth. And it was just so refreshing. Edward was such a wonderful person. He was an English professor. He was an author of many academic books. I just checked this morning. Some of them are on Amazon. He had poetry. He was a poet. He had the book that he gave me was wonderful, Homo erectus, which is still in print. Enjoyed that a great deal. Interesting tidbit about Edward is that his mom is Sylvia D, and she wrote the song, a very popular song in the late 50s, early 60s called "The End of the World," which was recorded by Skeeter Davis, and it's used in a bunch of movies. So he was getting royalties all along, the time that I knew him.
Wow.
But Edward was just a wonderful person, socially liberal, but a conservative, fiscal conservative type of person, really kind of a wonderful individual. And Bob and he lived in a house in Palm Springs that they called the Paradise Ranch. And when we finally got there, it was this beautiful oasis with a pool, and they had classical music playing. And Edward took care of our every need while we were there with, feeding us and making sure that, I had a shower and stuff, because after 4 days, one needed that. But it was a really great experience meeting him. And Bob had filled me in on who Edward was, and I could see why he needed to make that change. But we did talk about having my background, losing my partner, through a divorce because she came out as a lesbian. And then he had his leaving his wife. So.
The book is Laughing at the Sun, the story of a man who changed his spots. We have links in our show notes and on our website for you to get your copy. You can connect with Michael at michaelnaiman.com. That's NEJMAN.com. Thank you, Michael, for joining us here on The Gailey Show.
And could I just insert, if you're interested in Robert Fisher's work, he has Robert Fisher Photography, and you can see his books, and he does a lot of street photography. He's not doing as much painting as he did, but now it's photography. But I highly recommend you check that out. It's really well worth checking out.
Thank you for that plug. All right, we got to take another break here. Programming announcement.